In the roaring 1920s, a man named Charles Ponzi arrived in Boston, Massachusetts, with dreams of riches and a scheme that would captivate the nation. Ponzi, an Italian immigrant, had devised a plan that promised investors astronomical returns in a matter of weeks, promising 50% profits in just 45 days. Ponzi established the Securities Exchange Company and began aggressively marketing his investment opportunity to the public. Ordinary citizens, lured by the chance of quick and easy money, flocked to Ponzi, emptying their savings and mortgaging their homes to get in on the action. At the height of the frenzy, Ponzi was taking in over $1 million per week from investors eager to get rich quick. However, the reality was far more sinister. Ponzi was not actually investing the money at all. He was simply using funds from new investors to pay returns to earlier investors, creating the illusion of extraordinary profits. As the scheme grew, the amount of new money required to keep the facade going became unsustainable. Eventually, the truth began to unravel, and nervous investors rushed to withdraw their funds. The Ponzi scheme had collapsed, leaving thousands of people financially ruined and Ponzi's name forever synonymous with fraud. Arrested and convicted of mail fraud, Ponzi served 5 years in prison before being deported to his native Italy. His legacy, however, lived on, as the term Ponzi scheme became a byword for any fraudulent investment scheme that uses money from new investors to pay fake returns to earlier investors. The rise and fall of Charles Ponzi stands as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of get-rich-quick schemes and the importance of due diligence when it comes to investing. Even in the midst of the roaring 1920s, the lure of easy money proved too much for many, and the consequences were devastating. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, the music industry was captivated by the rise of boy bands, with acts like NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys dominating the charts. At the center of this musical phenomenon was a man named Lou Pearlman, a larger-than-life figure who promised aspiring artists the chance to achieve stardom. Pearlman, a self-proclaimed boy band impresario, founded several successful groups, including NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys. He presented himself as a savvy businessman with the connections and expertise to transform young talents into global superstars. Aspiring musicians flocked to Pearlman, eager to be a part of his vision. However, Pearlman's success was built on a foundation of deceit. Beneath the glitz and glamour of the boy band craze, Pearlman was running a massive Ponzi scheme, swindling investors out of hundreds of millions of dollars. Using the promise of high returns and the allure of the music industry, Pearlman persuaded individuals and businesses to invest in his various ventures, including his successful boy bands. But instead of using the money to fuel the growth and development of his artists, Pearlman diverted the funds into his own personal accounts, using new investments to pay off earlier investors and maintain the illusion of success. As the scheme grew, Pearlman's web of lies became increasingly complex, and the consequences became increasingly dire. Eventually, Pearlman's fraudulent activities were uncovered.
Boy band promoter turned federal prisoner.
Lou Pearlman sentenced today for defrauding banks and investors out of as much as $300 million. The judge handed down a 25-year prison sentence on the fraud and conspiracy charges, but Pearlman can have a month reduced for each million he pays back.
Thousands of people, from individual investors to the members of the bands he had created, were left financially devastated as the truth began to unravel.
This hasn't really affected me personally. but has affected my grandchildren because that money was there for their college education. It's gone.
The judge told Perlman he'll knock 1 month off of his 25-year sentence for every $1 million he returns to investors. Mary Walters, who lost $175,000, does not like the idea.
Even if he gets the money back, he should be put in jail and kept in jail until he dies.
Federal prosecutors would not say if they've found any hidden money, but Perlman's sentence, they say, gives him another chance to pay back investors. But will he?
I don't know. Time will only tell on that. Obviously, the judge gave Mr. Perlman every incentive.
Perlman died in prison on August 19, 2016. He was 62 years old at the time of his death. In the 1990s, a charismatic figure named Gerald Payne emerged as the leader of a religious organization called Greater Ministries International, based in Tampa, Florida. Payne, a self-proclaimed apostle, promised his followers a path to financial prosperity through his ministry's investment programs. Payne's message resonated with many, particularly those struggling financially. He claimed that by investing in Greater Ministries, believers could double their money in a matter of months, all while supporting the ministry's charitable work. Thousands of people, many of them elderly or vulnerable, were drawn to Payne's promises of miraculous returns. However, the reality behind Greater Ministries' investment schemes was far more sinister. Payne was not actually investing the funds, but rather using new investments to pay off earlier investors, creating a classic Ponzi scheme. As the number of participants grew, the amount of money required to sustain the illusion became unsustainable. Inevitably, the scheme collapsed, leaving thousands of individuals financially devastated. Many had invested their life savings, only to lose everything. The emotional and financial toll on the victims was immense, with some even losing their homes or facing bankruptcy. Investigations revealed that Payne and his associates had defrauded investors of over $500 million, one of the largest Ponzi schemes in U.S. history. Payne was arrested, charged, and ultimately convicted of racketeering, mail fraud, and money laundering, among other crimes. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, a man named Reed Slatkin captivated the attention of investors in the technology and entertainment industries. Slatkin, a self-proclaimed financial advisor and active member of the Church of Scientology, promised his clients extraordinary returns on their investments, using his connections and expertise to navigate the rapidly evolving world of technology and finance. Slatkin, a former Scientology minister, leveraged his religious affiliations and personal relationships to establish trust with his clients, many of whom were fellow members of the Church of Scientology. He presented himself as a savvy and successful investor, boasting of his ability to consistently generate double-digit returns, even in volatile market conditions. However, Slatkin was running a massive Ponzi scheme, using money from new investors to pay returns to earlier investors, creating the illusion of consistent profits. As the scheme grew in size and complexity, Slatkin's web of lies became increasingly difficult to unravel. He used sophisticated accounting methods and fabricated documentation to conceal the truth from his clients, many of whom were blinded by their trust in him and the promise of financial security. Eventually, the scheme collapsed, leaving thousands of investors, many of them members of the Scientology community, financially devastated. Slatkin had defrauded his clients of over $600 million, making his Ponzi scheme one of the largest in U.S. history at the time. In the late 2000s, a charismatic lawyer named Scott Rothstein captivated the city of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, with his lavish lifestyle and extravagant business ventures. Rothstein, the founder of the Rothstein-Rosenfeld-Adler law firm, portrayed himself as a savvy and successful investor, promising his clients astronomical returns on their investments. Rothstein's scheme was built on a foundation of deception. Instead of investing the funds as promised, he was operating a massive Ponzi scheme, using money from new investors to pay returns to earlier investors, creating the illusion of consistent profits. Rothstein's scheme was fueled by his ability to manipulate the judicial system, forging documents and colluding with corrupt law enforcement officials to maintain the facade of legitimacy. As Rothstein's empire grew, so did his obsession with luxury and power. He flaunted his wealth, purchasing multi-million-dollar homes, exotic cars, and even a $5 million yacht. Rothstein's ostentatious displays of affluence only served to further ensnare his victims, who were drawn in by the promise of sharing in his success. However, the Ponzi scheme could not be sustained indefinitely, and as the global financial crisis unfolded, Rothstein's house of cards began to crumble. In 2009, the scheme collapsed, leaving thousands of investors, both individual and institutional, financially devastated. The total losses were estimated to be over $1.2 billion, making Rothstein's Ponzi scheme one of the largest in Florida's history. Rothstein's arrest and subsequent conviction on charges of racketeering, wire fraud, and money laundering sent shockwaves through the community. In the early 2000s, Tom Petters, a Minnesota businessman, captivated the attention of investors with his promises of outsized returns and innovative business ventures. Petters, the founder of Petters Group Worldwide, built an empire that spanned retail, manufacturing, and financial services, positioning himself as a savvy and successful entrepreneur. However, the true nature of Petters' business model was far more sinister. Petters leveraged his connections in the business community and his reputation as a respected philanthropist to attract a wide range of investors, including pension funds, hedge funds, and individual high-net-worth individuals. He used sophisticated accounting methods and fabricated documentation to conceal the true nature of his operations, further enhancing the credibility of his investment opportunities. As the scheme grew in size and complexity, Petters became increasingly adept at maintaining the facade of success. He acquired a diverse portfolio of companies, from consumer electronics to toy manufacturers, all the while using the illusion of legitimate business operations to perpetuate his Ponzi scheme. The collapse of Petters' empire began in 2008, as the global financial crisis exposed the underlying weaknesses in his business model. Investigations revealed that Petters had defrauded investors of over $3.5 billion, making his Ponzi scheme one of the largest in U.S. history. The fallout from Petters' actions was devastating, not only for the individual investors who lost their life savings, but also for the broader community in Minnesota and beyond. The ripple effects of the scheme reverberated through pension funds, charitable organizations, and even the local economy, leaving a trail of financial ruin in its wake. Petters was arrested, convicted, and sentenced to 50 years in prison. R. Alan Stanford, a former professional cricket player turned financier, captivated the attention of investors across the United States and the Caribbean with his promises of consistent, high-yield returns on investments through his Stanford Financial Group. Stanford, a native of Texas, leveraged his personal charisma and the apparent stability of his financial institutions to attract a diverse clientele, including retirees, small business owners, and even high-profile public figures. Stanford was operating a massive Ponzi scheme, using money from new investors to pay returns to earlier investors, creating the illusion of consistent profits. To maintain the facade of legitimacy, Stanford employed sophisticated accounting methods, fabricated documentation, and even bribed officials in the Caribbean, where his offshore operations were based. He also used his connections and influence to secure regulatory approvals and avoid scrutiny, further entrenching his scheme. As the scheme grew in size and complexity, Stanford's lavish lifestyle and ostentatious displays of wealth only served to further captivate his victims. He built a sprawling corporate headquarters, purchased a private island, and even sponsored a high-profile cricket tournament, all funded by the illicit proceeds of his Ponzi scheme. The collapse of Stanford's empire came in 2009, when the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission and other regulatory authorities uncovered the true nature of his operations. Investigations revealed that Stanford had defrauded investors of over $8 billion, making his Ponzi scheme one of the largest in U.S. history. Stanford was arrested, convicted, and sentenced to 110 years in prison. The name Bernie Madoff has become synonymous with one of the most notorious financial scandals in modern history. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, Madoff, a former chairman of the Nasdaq Stock Exchange, captivated the attention of investors with his seemingly consistent high-yield returns through his investment firm, Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities, LLC. Madoff, a respected figure in the financial community, leveraged his reputation and connections to attract a wide range of clients, from individual retirees to institutional investors, such as hedge funds and charities. He portrayed himself as a skilled and disciplined money manager, able to generate steady profits even in the most volatile market conditions. However, the truth behind Madoff's success was far more sinister. Rather than engaging in legitimate investment strategies, Madoff was operating the largest Ponzi scheme in history, using funds from new investors to pay returns to earlier investors, creating the illusion of consistent profits. Madoff's scheme was remarkably intricate, involving sophisticated accounting methods, fabricated documentation, and a network of enablers and co-conspirators. He went to great lengths to maintain the facade of legitimacy, even going so far as to create a fictitious trading floor and generating false trade confirmations and account statements. As the scheme grew in size and complexity, Madoff's victims ranged from individual retirees who had entrusted their life savings to his firm to prominent philanthropic organizations and high-profile investors. The scale of the fraud was staggering, with estimates of the total losses reaching over $17 billion, making it one of the largest Ponzi schemes in history. The collapse of Madoff's empire in 2008 sent shockwaves through the financial community and beyond. Investigations revealed the devastating impact of his actions, with many investors losing their entire life savings and some charities and organizations forced to shut down due to the losses. Madoff was arrested, convicted, and sentenced to 150 years in prison. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Creating these videos requires a significant amount of effort, so your support and engagement are truly appreciated. If you've enjoyed this content, I'd encourage you to like this video and subscribe to our channel. By subscribing and hitting the notification bell, you'll be the first to know when we release new videos. Our goal is to continue providing high-quality, informative, and entertaining content on a regular basis. Your subscription and interaction with our channel will help us grow and enable us to invest even more time and resources into making these videos even better.